कृष्णो रक्षतु मां चराचरगुरुः कृष्णं नमस्ये सदा कृष्णेनैव सुरक्षितोऽहमसकृत् कृष्णाय दत्तं मनः.
What kind of activities are going on in nature? Compared to that, what are our activities? It is nothing. The moon is going around the earth is going around the sun. So many stars are getting born, so many stars are running into the black hole and getting destroyed. So many plants are growing over the earth. Even if you look at a plant, overnight a flower blossoms. How many cells, what kind of activity of the cells are there? Such tremendous activities are going on all over the universe. Is it out of any desire? It is all natural activity. It is all swabhava that is going on. Even animals, they are eating when they are hungry. They may kill also when they are hungry. But otherwise they are following their nature. In human being, of course, we have a self-effort, we have a self-will. But with that additional quality also, we can become natural, we can follow our swabhava. Suppose as a flower, a red flower blossoms as a red flower, a white flower blossoms as a white flower. The red flower does not think that, oh, everybody is liking the white flower, tomorrow I shall blossom as a white flower. Or in a remote corner of the earth, a flower is blossoming. It does not think that tomorrow nobody is coming to see me, so I need not blossom today. I will blossom some other day. In the remotest corners of the earth, the most beautiful flowers blossom. Their aim lies in blossoming. It is not out of any desire. It is their swabhava. Like that, a small grass flower, it is not less beautiful than a big rose, red rose. The grass flower is equally beautiful with its own qualities when it has blossomed fully. Similarly, the rose, when it blossoms fully with its own qualities, that is the most beautiful state of it. Like that, a human being also can blossom with all whatever qualities are there in his body, mind, personality. With that, when he blossoms freely, that is the best blossoming of human life. Each flower will be different, each person will be different. We should never look at the other person and compare that I would also like to blossom like the other person. I would blossom as I am, another person will be blossoming as he is, third person will be blossoming as he is. Everybody will blossom according to his own qualities, own parameters, and the fullest blossoming of the human life will be the most beautiful blossoming for him. Just like the flower we will blossom. That is the natural state of blossoming. That is what spirituality wants us to be. That is why it is often said that realizing the self is be what you are. The spiritual sadhana lies in being what we are, becoming natural. But how to become natural? Because we are always, our mind is clouded with desires. The best way to become natural is to understand the role of the desires, the futility of the desires. To do any work properly, we feel that the desire is the best motivation. But it is not so. Desire is only a hindrance. The best motivation comes out of our own qualities and the need of the circumstances. According to that, when we perform to our best. The desires for a particular outcome which I like, or to avoid what I dislike, the anxiety for that is always hindering our blossoming. We will come to this topic as we go along, because that is the fundamental subject of Bhagavad Gita. We will discuss it in further detail later on. But let us now come to what is the basic spiritual sadhana. We have discussed that the point where we are generally are, the ignorant position of us, is a very constricted idea about ourselves. We think that I am within the body-mind personality, I am segregated from the entire universe, and that is how I become selfish. I want to have what I want, even if it is harmful to others, because I think I am only limited by my body-mind personality. If you think a little more, you will understand. Suppose the factories are throwing effluent in the river. They are not treating their effluent the way they should do. Why? Because they want more profit. Now they are not thinking that the effluent which is being thrown into the river or into the atmosphere, they are going to pollute and poison their own health, and if not their own health, more of their children's health, more of their grandchildren's health. This poisonous effect of the effluents in the air as well as the river, it is not going to harm only others, it is going to harm himself as well as his progeny. And what will he do with his extra profit when the progeny is suffering from severe diseases, or the grandchildren who are supposed to bequeath his wealth, they are bequeathing a polluted earth? What kind of life they will lead? But we don't think of it, because we become slave to the profit, we become slave to the money. Our mind gets polluted by the desire. If we do not have that desire when we are producing something, will we not think very well how to produce well? Suppose I am going to put up a factory. So I will do it thinking of all the pros and cons, how the best product will be had, whether the product will be useful for the society and it will not be harmful for the society, and for the sustenance of the factory I must have a certain profit, what kind of marketing has to be done, all the pros and cons, everything he has to consider very well. But that desire is not called for that. He is going to do something which he is fit to do. If he is fit to do, he will do, and he will do it in his best manner. Desire will only spoil his effort, will spoil whatever he is performing. The performance is hindered by the desire. We have to understand the futility of this desire to become desireless. We must understand the greatness of living the natural life, pursuing with our natural qualities and the natural goal. And for everything we do, as we said, that we are looking for joy. When we become desireless, the joy is immediate, right there. When we perform anything without getting polluted by the desire that by doing this, finally I will gain this, and finally I will gain some more possession, and by that I will become happy. All those thoughts, when they are kept away, the performance will be the best, and every moment of work will become joyful. So the joy which we are aiming at by harboring desire and by trying to fulfill the desire, which joy is finally not coming, that joy will always be our possession. Every step we will have that joy. This is the way, if we think properly, then the desires will go. To remove the desires, we have to think about the hindrance of desire, the futility of the desires, and try to become more natural, more purpose-oriented, more exact and precise in our work. Well, that is also to be discussed further in Bhagavad Gita. I said that we start from that constricted idea about our own identity. It's the constricted self. We are small, we are limited by my body-mind personality, and I am fragmented from the entire world, separated from the entire world. Whereas the ultimate knowledge of spirituality is there is only one I, only one self, which is same as the Brahman, the Atma, the Paramatma, the Brahman. They are all same and one, and truly speaking, even beyond one, transcendental. So this universality of the identity is the final position. We start from the concept of a constricted identity, and we reach finally a liberated, infinite, universal identity. If this is the result of spiritual sadhana, then naturally we can conclude what is meant by spiritual sadhana. Is it not a process of expansion? Whatever leads us from a constricted identity, from a smallness to an universal expansion. The process of expansion only will take us to that universality. So whatever gives an inner expansion is spiritual sadhana. So we have to look within us and find out which is by doing what we will feel an inner expansion, a lack of constriction. By doing what, the inner stress, the constrictions will dissolve and I will become free, expanded. That will be the spiritual sadhana. Suppose by doing puja, doing homa, yajna, I become more selfish, then naturally puja, yajna is not spiritual sadhana. If by killing somebody also I become expanded, then even killing can become a sadhana. You may wonder how I am saying that, but look into Bhagavad Gita. What did Krishna ask Arjuna to do? Arjuna was refusing to kill his own people, and Krishna liberated his mind so that with no enmity, no hatred, he can kill his apparent enemy and his most beloved grandfather and teacher also. So taking his mind, by employing him, by exhorting him repeatedly to fight, Krishna was putting Arjuna into spiritual sadhana. That was his spiritual sadhana. Arjuna said, I will go to the forest, I will live on begging, live on alms, I will become a sannyasin. Krishna said, no, that is not for you. You have to fight the war, and there lies your spiritual sadhana. So we have to judge what is spiritual sadhana and what is not by looking within and finding what gives us expansion within, what expands our mind, what removes the constrictions from our mind. Well, this war example, we can go into some relevant example even now in the current days also. Suppose some special police officer or a team of forces, they are trying to catch some terrorists, and when they are right in front of the terrorist group, the chief of the staff, he finds that his son is heading the terrorist group, his son is leading the terrorists. What will he do? Normally he will not be able to arrest, not be able to kill or even arrest. Well, a good police officer may leave the duty on his subordinate and go away from there. A bad police officer may even try to somehow release his son, catching others. But really what our spirituality wants is that even if it is your son, you have to do the same thing. Had it not been your son, whatever you would have done in that case, you have to do the same thing here also. That is what Arjuna was asked to do. His most beloved grandfather he had to kill. And when he can kill the grandfather without hindered by his attachment towards him or his feelings towards him, he will be able to kill his enemies also without any enmity. When we have a special feeling for our beloved people, we will have enmity towards our enemy also. He would have fought Duryodhana and others with lot of enmity. But if he can fight his own teacher, own grandfather without any hindrance, without any obscurity, then he could have fought his enemy also without any enmity. So it makes us do whatever to be done. It frees us of all the bondages. That is what is meant by spirituality. So in a nutshell, or as a thumb rule, we can always see that spirituality means whatever leads to an inner expansion. Actually, this inner expansion is always accompanied by an inner strength also. In Kenopanishad, it is said that Atmana vinnate viryam, vidyaya vinnate amritam. Atmana vinnate viryam. the real courage, the real strength, the real power lies in our own Atma, in our within. It is not in the outer possession. The real strength does not lie in manpower or power of money or power of possessions. It lies within. So whenever we are looking within and we are getting connected to our soul, we become stronger, we become expanded. As the soul is universal, when we expand, we come closer to the soul. The more and more we expand, we come closer and closer to the soul. More we come closer to the soul, we become stronger and stronger and stronger. We become more and more fearless. So this spiritual sadhana is the path of expansion. But there are different ways by which we can proceed towards this goal. Broadly speaking, we can categorize it in two. That the usual Upanishadic sadhana, which is called Kevala Jnana Nishtha, or exclusive knowledge pursuit. Kevala Jnana Nishtha, or exclusive knowledge pursuit. That was the sadhana of the Upanishads. The pursuit was Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. That means, Shravana means first listening to the truth. I will add to it, those days perhaps the written material was not there, they used to only listen to the truth. But we can as well add to that reading about the truth. That is, knowing about the truth from another person. But truly speaking, Shravana means listening to the truth from a knower, from the Guru, from a knower Guru. Because when we listen to this truth, about this truth from a knower Guru, then it has a direct effect on us, on our mind. We get a real touch of the knowledge and we can grow easily, which will not happen when we listen to from somebody who has not known it, not realized it, or we read ourselves the scriptures. So that is the Shravana. Then comes Manana. After we have known about the truth from our Guru or from the scriptures, we have listened to the truth, we have read about the truth, then our intelligence will not easily agree to whatever has been said by the Guru or has been said by the scripture. We are not supposed to apply our intelligence to decry whatever we have listened to, whatever the Guru says, but we are definitely to analyze and to inquire what is the real meaning or hidden meaning behind what is written in the Shastras or whatever is spoken of by the truth. This is very important. We may argue and try to disprove whatever is talked about or written in the Shastras by showing some contradiction between different shlokas and all. But that is not the way of a seeker. A seeker should inquire, not argue. Whenever he is finding something contradictory and not acceptable, he should think that where am I missing? Where am I missing the truth that I am not able to grasp what the Guru is saying or the scripture is saying? And he can go on analyzing that the Guru is saying that the soul is unaffected, infinite, unbounded, unperturbed. But I am feeling that I am always getting affected, I am getting agitated. So how can I call that I am the soul which the Shastras are speaking about, what the Guru is telling me? Such introspection is the real Manana. So Manana, truly speaking, not just rumination or contemplation, but introspection also. Because this knowledge is about our own reality, about our own identity. The entire spirituality, it is not speaking about the objective things. It is speaking about our own identity, our own reality. So whatever is spoken of in the Shastras, they have to become true of our own identity. So we have to introspect and find out where the difference lies. Why am I not able to identify myself with what the Shastras say about the soul? So like that, the manana proceeds with all our intelligence, all our arguments, all our analysis, everything. As the manana reaches its zenith, we have exhausted all the analytical reasoning, everything. So the intelligence becomes doubtless about the truth, that yes, this is the truth, but yet I have not been able to realize it. So this is the only thing to be realized. So he becomes absolutely unconcerned about the whole external world and get fused into the contemplation of this reality until it gets dissolved in the reality. This is called nididhyasana. When after the manana the mind is doubtless, then no more crisscross arguments, but a continuous contemplation on the truth. Our Shastras say, Taila dharavat, like the flow of oil. As you pour oil, it doesn't get split into droplets, it's a continuous flow. Like that, the contemplation on the truth becomes incessant, becomes without any break. It is a continuous flow of that contemplation. And the zenith of that, when that contemplation also gets dissolved, comes the enlightenment, the fulfillment. This is called Kevala Jnana Nishtha, but mostly we will not be fit for this pursuit because we have worldly desires, we have likes and dislikes, we have hatred for the people we dislike, we have special attraction for people we love. So for us is not this Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana or exclusive knowledge pursuit, not Kevala Jnana Nishtha. Well, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, we can still try. It may not come to Nididhyasana in that case, but Shravana, Manana have to be continued. But we cannot have that Kevala Jnana Nishtha, the exclusive knowledge pursuit, until we become completely disillusioned about the worldly attractions and repulsions. So the Upanishadic sadhana was only this Kevala Jnana Nishtha. So very few people used to take to this and pursue it to the fullest extent. But later on, Bhagavad Gita presents a revolutionary concept where anybody, anywhere in the world, working in any field of activity can take up the pursuit of the same spiritual goal, provided he changes his attitude according to the prescription of Bhagavad Gita. The sadhana mostly prescribed in Bhagavad Gita is interactional, that is how our whole interactional life will change in the light of the truth. So various sadhanas has been prescribed in Bhagavad Gita. We will take up each of the sadhanas and see how each take us to the same goal. All the sadhanas prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita, they can be followed separately or together. Whatever we may follow, whatever we may take up, we will reach the same goal step by step. So the two categories are exclusive knowledge pursuit or Kevala Jnana Nishtha, which is the Upanishadic sadhana, and the other part is the interactional sadhana or the sadhana of Bhagavad Gita, which is a blend of all kinds of sadhana like karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, all blended together to take us to that ultimate goal. But truly speaking, the Bhagavad Gita sadhana, as it defines in the second chapter, 48th verse, it is samatva yoga. He says, Siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Yoga uchyate. Yoga is defined as evenness, equality in siddhi and asiddhi, success and failure.